That way. We're going to continue our story of God. If you've got your Bible, we'll be in the book of 1 Kings in a minute. Might take you just a moment to find the book of 1 Kings, but over the last couple of months, we have walked through about 3,000 years in the story of God. So if you've been here most of those weeks, you've gone a long way. We began with Adam and then Noah, then we got to Abraham and his family, then we showed up with Moses, the Exodus, and Joshua, his successor. And then we went to the period of Judges. We hit Gideon and Samson along the way, and then the time of Kings, David and Solomon. And now we're moving out of that. We're still in a period of Kings, but we're going to focus on a couple of prophets here. And we're going to pick up after Solomon had been gone about 50 years. And just as we saw last week, God said because of his unfaithfulness, God was going to tear the kingdom apart, and it would split. And it did. It split into two parts. There was a civil war, if you will, going on between the north and the south. They weren't necessarily fighting all the time, but there was a definitive line between the two. And so some of the tribes were in the north, some of the tribes were in the south. The north had its own king, the south did as well. And the king in the north was Ahab. He was a king that we're familiar with, if nothing else, because of who he married, which is probably the case for many of you men. You're famous because of who you married. And his wife was Jezebel. And Jezebel had a different faith. And it was one of the reasons that Solomon messed up. God told Solomon, don't go marrying somebody who doesn't love the Lord like you do, because it's going to mess things up. And it happened. And Ahab now has this wife, Jezebel, and her family, her understanding was that they worship the god Baal. Now, if you're from the South and you've been around any kind of part of this story, you probably heard it pronounced Baal. So either Baal or Baal, whichever one you want to go with is fine. I grew up around Baal, but I try to sound intelligent when I'm in front of you, so I'll say Baal, but it doesn't really matter. We're talking about the same false god, and that was who Jezebel worshiped. So her husband fell in line. And so you had the northern kingdom of God's people that were not honoring and often not even recognizing him as being their Lord, their creator. So God would call up different people to speak truth to the king or to his people. And one of the people that got called up to speak that truth was named Elijah. And Elijah was called up to speak to King Ahab and Jezebel. That did not go well. And so there was a lot of animosity between Jezebel and her husband Ahab, the king, and Elijah. And throughout Elijah's story, it's pretty cool. There's a drought, there's a famine, there's a miraculous feeding that God had. He gave Elijah food when there was no food to be had. Then there was this big showdown on the mountain, the sacrificial showdown, and all the prophets of Baal were there, and you had Elijah there. They were going to see who the real God was. A lot of fire and smoke and blood and swords, and it's a wild, wild story. And I'm immature enough just to love it, but there's a really cool story there. And but we're not going to get into all that. But then after that, he went on the mountain and God whispered to Elijah and he heard God's voice in that way. So it's a powerful, powerful time. Elijah's life was really, really hard. Ministry for Elijah was really, really hard. But his legacy was so powerful. And whenever the time came for Elijah to be no more, there was going to be a huge void in the lives of God's people. And really in biblical history, there would be a huge void whenever the time came for him to leave. What we're going to pick up today is about that time, and we enter into the story Elisha. So Elijah, with a J, is the one that was preaching to and against really Ahab and Jezebel, all that was going on, and Elisha is going to be the one to succeed him. And as I look through the story of Elisha and him being thrust into this moment, I was reminded of a time when I was a teenager. I was 15 years old. We went on a family vacation to Yellowstone. That was the first time we had been. It blew me away. It was an awesome thing. We got to see Rushmore along the way, into the Black Hills, the Dakotas, and into Yellowstone. It was awesome. And, or as my mom says, Yellowstone. But so anyway, however, wherever you're from, we were in Yellowstone and we had an incredible time. And then we were coming home and we were driving the loop. So we went through Colorado to come back, and I'm drawing as the map is like for me, but for you, other way. But we're coming back through Colorado, and then whatever else is between Colorado and Memphis, that was in my mind. Whatever comes through, and we're through Colorado, got to see some really cool stuff as we're driving by. I'm just staring out my window the whole time, seeing a part of the world I may never see again. I'm 15, thinking, wow, I may never get out west again. And so looking at all that, and then I heard those three words that every child longs to hear from his parent. you want to drive? Like that, those are the three words. That's what I heard. And as someone who had spent 15 years mastering the art of not paying attention, that was a jolt to the system, because I wanted for so long to hear my dad say those words, to trust me. Like, you can drive the family. You're in control. The one who drives is in control. Like, you can do this thing. I wanted so badly to hear that. But when he said it, the weight of the responsibility hit me. Like, this is big. And we don't have Google Maps yet. This was pre-internet, so there was no smartphone to follow. You just kind of had this is where we're going. You either wrote it down or you had your atlas or whatever, or maybe even print out on some weird paper some kind of direction thing. And so we had directions, but we didn't have directions. And Dad chose to give me the blessing of driving through Kansas. Now, I know that God created everything, and it's all beautiful to him. But to me, there are some not beautiful parts. And I feel like Kansas was like, well, I've kind of done it all. Let's just let it be flat. Let's just let grass, just Kansas, that's it. Everywhere else gets an attraction. You either get a mountain, or you get ocean scenery, or you get the valleys, or you get the river. Like, Kansas is just there. And if you're from Kansas, it's not a knock. I have not been exposed to the pretty parts yet. So at this point, so we're driving through Kansas and everything's the same. I look back in the rearview mirror. It couldn't have been 30 minutes into my driving time. My sister had fallen asleep. Looked back and kind of tilted the mirror, saw my mom. She was asleep. I looked over at my dad in the passenger seat. He was asleep. And I'm just there driving thinking, this is what I wanted? Like, this is really, I thought this was the pinnacle. Like, this is awful. Like, I'm falling asleep. I'm veering off a little bit. I'm nodding. I'd hit those little grooves on the interstate. And my dad would look back at me and go, you cool? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I was just, checking you. I'm dying. My eyes are, it's just. So I felt like I drove for 12 hours. I'm sure it was probably 2. I don't remember. It felt so long. But the thing that I thought I wanted so badly, I was ill prepared to receive. Like, that gift, and I didn't even want it. By the time it was over, Dad was like, how's it going? I'm like, I'm cool whenever you want to, I don't want to mess it up. I know you've got a way, and maybe I'm slowing us down. I did everything I could to talk my dad back into driving. Like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And whatever chapter you're living right now in the story that God has written for you, regardless, there are going to be moments in which you are thrust into a position that you're not really prepared for. Some of the transitions are obvious: graduation or relocation or a new job, a new relationship, marriage, kids. Like, it's pretty obvious there. But there are also just times when God opens an opportunity, opens up a door and gives you an invitation to step in or step out of faith, whatever the case may be, and do something you haven't done before. And in those moments, I think how we succeed or don't succeed is going to be largely dependent on how prepared we were for that moment. So I think in the life of Elisha, we see a couple of things to be reminded of as we step into that new area of life. Now, if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, this is also a great time to truly grasp what it is that God is calling you to. Now, Jesus had not yet come to earth and lived, and he said, come and follow me at this point. But there is an obvious picture of what it truly means to be a follower of Jesus. And I hope you'll catch that as we go on, and I'll definitely do my best to make it clear towards the end. But Elisha, at this point, was not a prophet in waiting. He wasn't dreaming of it in school for it. He was farming. And he's home, he's farming, he's plowing the field. He's there behind his oxen with his plowing equipment. And Elijah shows up at his house. And he takes what is called his cloak or mantle. There was an outer garment he was wearing that signified who he was as the prophet of God. And he took that and he placed it on Elisha. And when Elisha had that garment, cloak, scarf-ish thing around him, he knew what that meant. Elijah was saying, the time is coming and I'm going to pass it on to you. You're going to be the next me. He got it. And he immediately ran home and told everyone goodbye. And in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 21, it says, he took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his servant. Elisha receives this call, this invitation, and he left everything. He locked up his old life. He threw away the key. He was all in. I mean, the visual of him saying, I'm a farmer, I'm plowing, and I'm just going to slaughter all of these oxen. I'm going to feed them to you. I'm going to take all my equipment and chop it up. It's going to be the wood on which I place this meat. And I'm done. I am moving on. I'm going to step into this next thing that God has for me. And Elisha here is demonstrating some incredible trust in that he's saying, God, I know that I'm not going to be able to receive what you have for me until I let go of what I'm holding on to. I'm not going to be able to have an addition until there's a subtraction. I've got to let go of what I'm holding on to if I'm going to experience what's next. And in that, I think we find the first of two clues here as Elisha lives out his life for us. And number one is empty hands. If we're going to step into this new thing that God has for us, if we're going to experience this transition into the next chapter of life, whatever that may be, no matter how spiritual or unspiritual it might seem, if God is opening up this door, number one, from Elisha's perspective, we need to make sure that we have empty hands, that we're able to receive whatever it is that God has for us. When you buy a new car, if you choose to trade in, you don't get to keep both sets of keys. I mean, you have to let it go and you walk away. When you enter into a new relationship, you don't continue to talk or text with the people that you were in the old relationship with. If you do, I just want you to know that you have a very short time left in that relationship. So it's almost over, so just hang on. You're going to kill it really soon. But you have to move on and realize, I'm letting go of that. And Elisha's way was saying, I've got all this stuff and I'm done with it. And to the point where I'm willing to burn my plow, allow it to be the fire. I'm going to kill all these oxen. I'm going to sacrifice it. We're going to have a meal and I am moving on. And I know there's more to it and perhaps not just this, but I wonder at times, and I've often wondered this when I've read the story of Elisha, if there was any part of him that knew he might be tempted to go back. And it seems a little drastic to break up all your, equipment, set it on fire and kill all your oxen. But I wonder if there's any part of him that thought, if there's an opportunity for me to go back to the old me, I know I'll do it. And so I need to make a clean break and I got to move on. Before this bridge, our church family was in existence, for me, there was a transition period. I really had thought perhaps I was done with the preaching, teaching aspect of life. And I'd gotten okay with that. And I wanted to move on. And I thought, God, do something different with me now. I really wanted to be a middle school football coach and just kind of do all that. But there's this weird, you got to go to school anyway. But I wasn't certified to do that. But I really thought maybe that's the path. I really wanted to head down to begin and do something different. Still wanted to make a difference for Jesus, but thought maybe in a different avenue. And I bring that up because I remember a conversation I had with my mom, and it was a really hard one. Because she said to me, this is what God has called you to do. How I said, listen, I want to be done. I want to be able to have a little bit of a funeral, and I want to say goodbye to everything that I once held so close. So what I had done was when I cleaned everything out, I took all my books and I took all my papers and all my stuff and the sermons and everything, and either it went to the trash or Goodwill, and it was just completely gone. I gutted everything, and I thought, I'm done. And my mom said, wait a minute, hold on. I said, listen, Mom, what I know for sure is that the God I serve is really good at raising the dead. So if he desires to resurrect it, he can do it if he wants to. But until he does that, I have to be willing to say, I'm done with that and I'm wide open. Whatever you want to do with me, God. And I spent almost 2 years just going, whatever you want to do. And then slowly but surely, God began to morph this thing that ended up becoming this. And I'm so thankful he did. I would have missed out on you, and you have made my life so much better. And you have invested so much, and you've given me so much hope. With every one of you that I've been able to kneel with and pray and see you become a follower of Jesus or enter to those baptism waters with you, I'm so, so thankful for that. And it's so much better than telling middle schoolers how to run the wing T. I'm so much better. I'm good with it. But I needed to be able to just put it all away and say, God, you got me. I got nothing in my hands. I'm wide open. Whatever you want to do, do it. And of course, God stuck me right back where he had me. But I'm thankful. And I don't know what season of life you're in. And I know it's really, really scary to let go. Whether it's let go of a dream or let go of a relationship or let go of a job or whatever it may be, let go of resources or money or hope or a path that you were on. But whenever God begins to open that up, it may not require that. But I'm just saying that Elisha was willing to go, okay, if I never come back to this life, that's going to be fine. And if I come back, it's going to be because you send me back, not because it just got really hard over here. So I'm going to go back to being the old me. And if you're a new follower of Jesus, you know this. I mean, life is brand new for you. And some of you are following Jesus seriously for the first time in your life. Maybe there was a decision you made as a child, but now it's ramped up to like, no, this is my decision. And all of a sudden it's getting really hard. And it would be so easy for you just to go back to the way it was last year or a couple of years ago. And you just didn't feel the weight of it right now. You didn't feel like you always had to do this and do that for him and be this way and let go of that. It was so much easier, it seemed, back then. And sometimes when we're weak, in our weakest moments, we go back. And for Elisha, it was like, I'm going to burn the whole thing down and begin again. I don't want to be able to even go back to that. So empty hands for him. But there's something else, and we find it as we move forward. So turn to 2 Kings. In the book of 2 Kings, Elijah is about to leave. It's been a while, but he spent some time with Elisha, and he knows the time is coming. And Elisha seems to grasp it too. The two of them are having a walk. They're talking together. Maybe they're doing a little mentoring. Maybe he's continuing to remind him of some things. But a couple of different times, Elijah told Elisha, hey, why don't you stay back? I'm just going to go take a little walk here. And Elisha said, no. You're not going without me. Why don't you stay back? No, I'm with you. And a couple of times, Elijah tried to get Elisha just to give him some space. And Elisha, he felt what was coming. So he continued to stay close. They get to the edge of the Jordan River, or at least a portion of the Jordan River. We don't know that it was his widest, deepest point, but at least they're there in front of the water. And they're there, and as they're walking and talking, you'd think you would stop when you get to the water's edge. But as they're walking and talking, Elijah just takes off that cloak of his and slaps the water, and the water parts and moving on. And if I'm Elisha, I'm behind him going, he is so cool. Like, how does he, if I could. So he's just walking across, and then the water goes back behind him. And are we not going to stop and acknowledge the miracle? Elijah's just moving on. And in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9, it says, when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what can I do for you before I am taken from you? So now it's pretty clear. He's leaving in some way. And Elisha's answer is, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Elisha wanted a double shot of whatever it was that God had done through Elijah. And that double portion of your inheritance would be a familiar term in another day and time, because for a firstborn child, that was the request, the expectation, that we're all getting an inheritance, all your kids, but as the firstborn, I get a double portion. And Elisha is not asking for money. He's saying, whatever it is that God has been doing in you, I want some of that. Like, I want a double shot of that. I want to be able to be used in the way that God worked through you. And being able to part waters would not be a bad little, gift on the side. And Elijah's response to him was, well, if when I am taken, you see me, then you'll know that you have that gift. And again, I don't know that he quite understood what being taken meant. For Old Testament people during this time, they still didn't have a vision of the streets of gold and of heaven and the throne room of God and laying down your crowns. And Jesus had not yet talked about, in my Father's house are many mansions and all. Like, none of that was there. They just had a concept of, you die, you go into the ground, you're in this place of the dead, Sheol, and you're there. And there is an afterlife, but it's we're not quite sure what goes on. We know we're made for eternity. We get that part perhaps. But he says, when I'm taken up, if you see me, you'll know that your wish has been granted, if you will. Well, we have this idea, this concept, this picture of a chariots of fire that take Elijah up. And we're just all guessing. And anyone you read is just going to be guessing what this is about. But Elijah is taken up. He doesn't fall dead. He's taken to heaven in this wild whirlwind of an experience, and chariots take him off, and Elisha sees it. And when he sees it, he also sees that Elijah's cloak is left behind. So he reaches down and he picks up the cloak that Elijah dropped, and he turns around, and nearby obviously is that water that they just crossed. And I don't know how long he stood there at the edge of the water, but he held that cloak and thought, well, let's see. And he slaps that water, and the water goes across. And the Bible says Elisha walked across. I think he strutted. I don't know. But like that is a moment. He struts across the water back because it's on now. Like he realizes that double portion of that inheritance is on him, and God's favor and God's hand of power is on him the way it was on Elijah. We're even told that there were a group of people on the other side of the water that watched the whole thing happen. So now Elisha has, in many ways, he's been the recipient of this baton of leadership. He wasn't really prepared for it. He wasn't necessarily asking for it until he realized it was about to be the end of Elijah, but he experienced it. And the second part of Elisha's life that I think shows up here is that he had a teachable spirit. It wasn't just about empty hands. It was also about a teachable spirit. He walked and talked and lived with Elijah, and along the way, he's taking in everything he can. Not that he was a guy without any intelligence or without any understanding of what was going on, but he just knew if he was going to be the person that God was calling him up to be, this prophet, he was going to have to learn a little more. And he learned along the way, and he had that spirit. And for me, it's an incredible reminder that I need to make sure that I have some people in my life that are living their lives in such a way that if I end up like them, I'm okay with that. Like, that's all right. To have some people, it doesn't have to be a formal relationship in which I say, hey, teach me how to live like you. Teach me your ways, oh master. None of that. Like, that would really be odd if I stopped some of you in the lobby and said, show me how to be like you. Like, you would probably think, this is not the church for me. Like, I don't think I can do that. And most people aren't going to come to you and say, hey, I'm willing to mentor you. And even that's kind of odd. And so that's why sometimes the connection group opportunities are great, because you're around them. But however it works out, you need to have some people in your life that are living life in the way that you wouldn't mind living, that somehow that they're making the decisions that you had hoped you would have made if you hadn't have chosen the wrong one. Like, you have someone there as a picture, as an example of that. And if you are the most attuned with and most spiritually mature person in your entire circle of friends, one, congratulations that you're growing. But two, that is very dangerous. It's dangerous for all of us. Like, I need to have people around me that challenge me, that make me question some things that I haven't questioned in a while. I need to have people around me that when they make decisions, I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty hardcore. Like, am I really willing to be that all in? Or am I just going to continue to do what I do? Because the moment my spirit is too strong and I'm too full of pride to be willing to question myself, my own decisions, or to grow, then I might just stay right where I am, and I'm not going to be prepared for whatever it is that God has in store for me next. So what happens when I follow Elisha's lead? What's the result of living with empty hands and having a teachable spirit? Well, I'm going to show you with one final moment in his life before we move on from Elisha. In 2 Kings chapter 6, we've got this pretty wild story in which the king of Aram is there with his Aramean army, and they are in battle against Israel. And Israel is on the move. And every time the Arameans set up camp, they prepare, then they realize that the Israelites have just left the day before. And so they're trying to figure out who is the mole, like who is feeding all of the intel to the people of Israel, because it's really messing up the plans of the Arameans. And in chapter 6, verse 11, this enraged the king of Aram, we're told. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel. None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. In other words, let's just call off the search for Israel and its army right now. Let's find Elisha. I want him, and not to say thank you. I want to find him. We take him out, then we take out the problem, then we'll be able to conquer the people of Israel. So they do. They find Elisha. Elisha, with one of his servants, is inside a house, and they are hunkered down by themselves there. Don't know that they know it's coming, but Elisha tends to know a lot, so perhaps he knew they were coming. But they're there in the house, and one morning, sun hits. One of his servants, Elisha's servants, gets up, looks out the window, a cup of coffee. He says, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" And Elisha gives him an opportunity to say what his problem is. He says, "We have an enemy army of Arameans right around us. Like, this is it for us." And Elisha mumbles under his breath a little prayer and says, "God, help him to be able to grasp what's really going on, to see the reality." And he said it this way in verse 17. Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Pretty amazing moment. Like, I see the enemy army around me. Elisha looked out, saw something completely different. He looked out and said, "Yeah, I see enemies, but right behind them, there's an entire army of God's warriors there ready to protect and to defend us. We are not alone." Elisha's servant, what are you talking about? I do not see this." He prayed, and then he was able to see what's really going on. The result of having those empty hands for all those years and that teachable spirit for all those years was he was now at a place where he was able to see what other people could not see and see God at work in a way other people could not see him. And the best way that I've just described this for my own memorization purposes is clear eyes. He was able to clearly see what God was doing. And I think right now, for all of us, we're in that spot more than we've ever been before in our lifetime. Not in the history of the world. We know it was worse before. It'll be worse later. But right now for us, as we look out, so many of us, and so many of the people around us, so many of the people that you work with and go to school with, they're looking around and they're seeing everybody hating everybody. They're seeing all the division, all the stuff. They're reading about Christians all over the world being drugged from their homes, being kidnapped, taken away, many of them executed because they claim the name of Jesus. And we're just overwhelmed by all this stuff going, what is going on? And those of you who have been walking with God with empty hands and a teachable spirit are able now to speak into those people's lives and go, "Oh, we're okay. God is still in control. He is still on the throne here. He hasn't relinquished any power at all. Yeah, it's getting loud and we see all this stuff, but I'm telling you, right behind, there is the protective hand of an almighty, in control God, and we're going to be okay." It's not easy. It's not always enjoyable, but it is not off the rails as everyone seems to think. And if you're in that spot even right now, I know that feeling. And I've been there before, several points in my own life, where I'm the one in the house going, what in the world is going to go on? I don't know what to do here. And in those moments, I have to stop and say, "God, help me to see you behind all this and through all this. Help me to know that you're in control. I'm not equipped or qualified for this. I'm not ready for this challenge in life. I'm not ready for this moment." Some of you right now are going through for the very first time legitimate health scares like you have never experienced before. And you're not ready for it. And you feel like your faith is just falling apart. Some of you are just in new seasons of life and you are so equipped to be able to handle what's going on. Just last week, my sister's husband passed away. And so now in her 40s, my sister's a widow. Like, you're just not ready for that. Like that, you don't prepare yourself for that change in that season and that moment in life. But those moments happen. And in those moments, we have an opportunity, those of us who have been through the fire and God's delivered us on the other side, to help speak truth to people and say, "God, Help them to see this and to tell them, listen, you are not alone in this. I don't know what's going to happen here, but you are not alone in this moment. And there is a protective hand of God all around you. You just have to open your eyes so that you're able to see what's going on and to see that. If you're not a follower of Jesus, this is a great picture of what he's asking when he says, come follow me. Now, oftentimes we'll look at truth and we'll look at salvation as a drive-through church, just come on in, get a little forgiveness. I'm guilty, wash me clean and let me go on. And while forgiveness is the main need we have, God asks us and invites us to more. I mean, Jesus says, if anyone would come after me, if anyone wants to follow me, let him take up his cross and follow me. Not a light cross, not a cross with no blood. Just, in other words, you be willing to say goodbye to the old man and you begin again. That's the call. Not, hey, don't worry about it. Just bring all your stuff. Bring all your bags. I'll sprinkle a little forgiveness over the top and you don't have to change anything. Just move on. That's not the call. The invitation that Jesus gives us is much greater than that. To have empty hands, to have that teachable spirit, and God begins to do his work in and through us. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, that's the invitation. I know a lot more people would say yes and grab that card in front and go, today I've become a follower of Jesus. If all you got to do is pray a prayer and don't change a thing. But that's not what God asks of us. But maybe some of you are so overwhelmed with your moment right now that you can't even think about that. I get it. And so my prayer for you today is that God will open your eyes and let you see you're not alone. You're not by yourself in this fight. And God will never leave you and he'll never forsake you.